Yes.
Afternoon, sir.
Okay, good. There are some students I see.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Marsha is there. Antoinette, Belinda, Colette. Okay. Okay. You know what problem we're doing? Lithuania. And I just want to go over, if you didn't get the formulae, you have another chance to get them. And you need to write, class. You need to write, not just see. The learning comes from writing, not seeing, but writing, listening and writing, and practicing as well. So we're looking at the direct material usage variance. Standard usage for actual production. But we open brackets first. Standard usage for actual production minus actual usage. Close brackets. And then we're going to multiply that by the standard price per kilogram. Did we get that? Hello?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what is my standard? Let's break it down for understanding. What's our standard usage, class? What's the
Sir,
standard usage? Yes?
could you repeat that? I'm sorry, I didn't get it.
The formula?
Yes, sir.
Yes, will do. I'm giving you the direct material usage variance. Though it's the same as the one you got last week. Did you write down the one last week?
Yeah,
Did you?
yeah, I did.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask you to revert to it and let's see. Let me hear what you have.
The direct material price variance.
No, usage. Who's speaking? Marsha?
Belinda.
Oh, Belinda. Oh, yes. Belinda, go ahead.
The direct material usage
Usage.
variance
Yes.
is the standard usage for actual production minus actual usage. Open
And
and
that's
close.
in brackets. Pause. Did you have anything bracketed?
Yes, open and close brackets, yes.
Right. And then you're going to multiply by what?
Standard rate per pound.
Okay. And in that case, it was pound. In this case, in this problem, it will be per kilogram. You appreciate that?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, so
If I wanted to make it, yeah, go ahead, Belinda.
the time standard rate.
Okay. We could have said standard rate per unit. Okay, to make it generic, Belinda and class, we could have said standard rate per unit of measurement of material. That would have made the formula generic.
Okay.
And what do we mean by that? It would, the materials in this case measured in kilograms.
Right.
The material are measured in kilograms. You hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir.
But in another case, it could have been measured in pounds. Who is that?
Giovanni, did you just say standard rate for material units? I didn't hear you properly.
Or same thing. That's the same thing as the standard rate per unit of measurement of materials.
Okay, okay.
Meaning whatever the materials are measured in, you're going to be multiplying by that price.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So in this case, it's per kilogram. I think in the class last week, it would have been per pound.
Pounds, yes, sir. Perfect.
Yeah. So that's making the formula generic. So it suits all occasions. So Belinda, are you okay?
I'm okay, yes.
Yes, okay. Now, we talked about a formula. I want to break it down even further. One word at a time, or blocks at a time. So we said standard usage. What's our standard usage?
6 kilograms.
6 kilograms, that's right. So we point to 6 kilograms for actual production. What's our actual production, class?
75,000 units.
That's right, the actual output. The actual output. So we multiply those two. Standard usage for actual production, we multiply those two. Because what it's really saying is that if 1 unit ought to use 6 kilograms, then if we're using 75,000 units, we ought to use 6 times 75,000. We ought to use 450,000 kilograms. Are we there?
Yeah.
6 times 75,000 is 450,000. That's what we ought to use. But how many kilograms did we actually use? We go below.
453.
We use 453,000. And automatically, we begin to ask ourselves now, will our usage variance be adverse or favorable?
Adverse.
It's going to be adverse because we have used more than the plan. The plan was to use 450,000 and we used more. We used 453,000. So that makes it adverse. That makes it adverse. But we're not finished. We're going to multiply what's in our brackets by what?
36.
We're going to multiply it by 36. Can we just go up here and we see $36 per kilogram? So then, what is our answer? Colette, can you give us the answer, please?
108,000 adverse. $108,000 adverse.
So we're looking at it on our whiteboard. We're looking at it on our whiteboard. Okay. Any questions? That's it there being highlighted. Okay, if there are no questions, and remember, feel free to ask questions. Let's now go to the direct material price variance. What is our expected price per kilogram? What are we paying for each kilogram of material? Question?
$36.
$36 per kilogram. That's what we expect to pay. But what did we actually pay?
30.
$30 per kilogram. Now, how did we get $30 per kilogram? If we go down to the thing just below 75,000 units and we look for direct materials, we see 453,000 kilograms costing $13,590,000. That gives us what? $30 per kilogram. That's what we actually paid for our materials. The plan was to pay $36, but we actually paid $30. So again, before we get to the answer, is that favorable or adverse?
Favorable.
Favorable.
It's going to be favorable because we're paying less than we had planned to pay. So $36 per kilogram minus $30 per kilogram in brackets, and we multiply by the actual quantity purchased, which is 453,000 kilograms. And that should give us $2,718,000, and that's favorable. $2,718,000, and it's favorable. Why is it favorable? Because we paid less than the plan. We planned to spend $36 on each kilogram purchase, and we actually spent less. We spent $30. So that would make it favorable. Okay, class. Let us now look at the direct labor efficiency variance. The direct labor efficiency variance. How long it takes us to make our output. Let's interpret the line that says 20 hours at $79 per hour, and out to our right we have $1,580. We're saying that we expect to take 20 hours to make 1 unit, and we expect to pay $79 for each hour worked. It therefore means that the labor cost reflected in 1 unit of whatever we're making would be $1,580. $1,580. That is the expected labor cost to make 1 unit. We expect to use 20 hours, and we expect to pay $79 for each hour, and therefore our labor cost, we expect it to be $1,580. But we made 75,000 units. So how many hours should we use to make 75,000 units, class? Hello?
1.5 million.
1,500,000. Class, you got silent and I get nervous when my students get silent. Are you following what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
We are multiplying.
You are writing, sir.
Oh, you're writing. Okay.
That's why.
Am I going too fast? Please let me know.
Times.
Someone saying?
Slow down a little bit, sir.
Okay. Yes. So even though you have the working there, class, work it again, because practice makes perfect. So we have 1,500,000 hours minus 1,520,000 hours. We open and close the brackets. And we're going to multiply that by $79 per hour. Multiplying that by $79 per hour. 1,500,000 hours. But first of all, open brackets, 1,500,000 hours minus 1,520,000 hours. And we automatically know that because we have used more hours, the bottom part is our actual. We have used more hours than planned. We know that it must be favorable.
Hold on.
Did I ever tell you that you
Could
can't
you
correct
explain
me?
that one?
Adverse, sir.
Favorable or adverse?
We have adverse to that, sir.
And you have the right to correct me. I deliberately made that error to see if you would be sharp enough to pick it up. You're slow though. Watch it.
Really, sir?
You're slow.
Really?
Sir, remember we have to unmute the mic, you know.
Okay, so it is adverse because we have used more hours. We have used more hours than planned. Okay, so having established that it is adverse, we're going to multiply by $79 per hour, and we should have $1,580,000, and that is going to be adverse. $1,580,000, and it's going to be adverse. Okay, let us let us move now to the direct labor rate variance. What did we plan to pay for each hour, class? What did we plan to pay for each hour?
$79.
$79.
$79, that's correct. What did we actually pay for each hour?
70.
70. So let's pause a while. Will this be adverse or favorable?
Favorable.
Favorable.
It's going to be favorable. And then we're going to multiply what's in the bracket by 1,520,000 hours. Are you there? We're going to multiply by 1,520,000 hours.
No, sir. Sir,
After
what
working direct labor rate variance,
you say a while ago, sir?
we're multiplying by 1,520,000 hours.
No, sir.
Agree?
No, sir.
What are we calculating? Direct labor rate variance. The formula is what? Standard
Oh.
rate per hour.
Oh, I was at number 3, sir. Sorry about that. Sorry about that, sir. I was at number 3. I
And
was
we're
going
at
to the
number 4. We're at number 4.
Okay, sir.
Mhm. Class, anybody with any questions? So you notice what we have. We multiply by 1,520,000 hours, and we arrive at $13,680,000, and it's favorable. In the early days, I gave you some notes. A variance, unless it's 0, must have capital A or capital F beside it, 1, and a variance must be measured in dollars. Now I've seen where some students, because let's take direct materials, for example. You have kilograms and you have dollars, and so they have an answer, kilogram dollars. That doesn't lend itself to understanding at all. So I'm going to suggest to you that it cannot be kilogram and dollars for your answer. If we go back to any of those computations that we have, you will see that the variance is simply in dollars. You look at any of the computations for any of the variances, they're simply in dollars. Not dollars and kilograms or dollars and hours. They are in dollars. And a variance must have either favorable or adverse. And the only time it is not expected to have favorable or adverse is when it is 0. If it is not 0, then it would have A or F. And we know when we have A, and we know when we have F. And note that there are capital A's and capital F's. Can I move on now, class? So, can I move on to the variable overhead efficiency variance? Please stop me if I'm going too fast. No, I want to apologize to the class because you see where we have 20 hours at $37 per hour, that should have been blank. And you would have been required to fill it in. This is a past paper, and I remember the year when this past paper was set, students blocked Ring Road and said that they were insulted because they were robbed of their ability to show their academic prowess. So I want to just apologize to you for robbing you of the ability to fill in the 20 hours at $37 per hour. But remember the problem we worked last week. Didn't we fill that information in?
Yes,
No.
sir.
Remember that, class? Filling in that information.
Yes, we did. But in this case, we're given the information.
Yes, students don't like to be given the information. They like to fill it in though.
I don't think you should speak for us.
Pardon?
I don't think you should speak for us.
Well, I got that from feedback.
Okay.
Okay, so I have to listen to the feedback if it's reasonable.
Sir, we don't mind if you put it on it for us.
Yeah, yes, we don't.
Okay, that's
We're
12.
okay with you putting it
Sir,
there.
that's our feedback. We want it to be on it.
That's 2 out of 30. I can't listen to that. If you
The rest
fix
will
it to the
speak
I
max,
in
agree
the
with
chat.
my classmates.
7%.
Your persons are speaking out, sir.
Not hearing them, I only heard 2 students speaking.
3.
Okay, even then that's 10% of the class. Anyway, let's move on. Okay, so we're looking, okay, we don't have to go through the calculations of that though. But let me ask you a question, class. Did you understand what we did last week when it was blank? Tremaine Ellis. Tremaine?
Yes, sir.
Yes, do you understand what we did last week when it was blank?
So we basically worked backwards because we got one of the variables.
Right, we had the labor hours.
Mm-hmm.
So what we'd have done, notice that variable overhead has the same hours that direct labor has. Notice 20. Tremaine, you're on the floor.
Yes, sir, yes.
Okay, and notice that variable overheads and fixed overheads, they have the same hours that labor has.
Mm-hmm.
At the top, which is 20. And when we go below, the labor hours is 1,520,000. And that is also the labor hours for variable overheads and fixed overheads. And what leads us to do that? Because it says overheads are absorbed on the basis of direct labor hours. What does it mean? It means that your labor hours will be the same for variable overheads and fixed overheads as mirrored in the direct labor. So the hours are the same. And then if you have the hours and you have the figure to the right, you can work out the rate per hour, don't it?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Okay, so we have that right there.
Sir, when we're calculating the variable overhead efficiency, what exactly are we looking for? What I want to know is that you said for like the direct labor efficiency, we'd be looking at how long it takes to make the output.
Yes.
So in terms of like the variable
overheads and the fixed overheads, what it's basically saying is that it's labor intensive. That's the first commentary you want to, that's the first observation you want to make. That if you have labor hours attached to your variable overheads and fixed overheads, first of all, it's saying that your operations are labor intensive, meaning that it's not highly mechanized at all. It's labor. A lot of the activities done in your production environment, they're labor intensive. So your variable overheads would be influenced by the presence of labor and labor hours. So what do we expect our labor hours to be? And what actually is it? So notice that your variable overheads and fixed overheads. And what's an example of variable overheads? An example of variable overheads would be something like the oil that the machine uses. Are you hearing me?
Yes,
sir.
That's an example of variable overheads. And remember the nature of variable overheads, the more of a thing that you produce, the more that it would use. And then what's an example of fixed overheads? What's an example of fixed overheads? In the context of a factory setting, your fixed overheads would be the factory manager's salary, or the salary of the supervisor. in the factory. So your overheads are influenced by the hours if you're in a manual environment. And so you're looking at the efficiency that comes out of your variable overheads. You're looking at what you plan to spend, your hourly rate as a plan versus what you actually spend for your variable overheads, as measured in your variable overhead spending variance. Student who asked, have I shed any light?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so variable overhead efficiency variance, variable overhead efficiency variance. What we have in the bracket, I want us to note, is the same thing that we would have in the bracket for direct labor efficiency variance. So if we were to look on our workings for direct labor efficiency variance, or direct labor efficiency variance, we had 1,500,000 minus 1,520,000 in the brackets for direct labor efficiency variance. That's what we had in our brackets. And we're going to have the same thing in the brackets. Not the same answer, but the same thing in the brackets for the variable overhead efficiency. Don't you see the same thing in the bracket for direct labor efficiency and variable overhead efficiency? You might want to take a note that the same figures will appear in the brackets. The same figures will appear in the bracket for direct labor efficiency variance and variable overhead efficiency variance when overheads are absorbed. When overheads are absorbed on the basis of direct labor hours.
You say of the basis?
Pardon?
Of the basis of direct labor hours?
That's right. That's right, yes. Okay.
Sir, may I ask you to repeat that, please?
Yes, I'm saying that the content in the brackets for direct labor efficiency variance and variable overhead efficiency variance will be the same when overheads are absorbed on the basis of direct labor hours. You got that now?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, good. Did I say that the answer would be the same, class? Did I say the answer would be the same?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No,
Are
sir.
we using a different rate?
Because you're multiplying by something different. But what's in the brackets for direct labor efficiency and variable overhead efficiency will be the same. Let me ask another question. Will it always be the same?
Sir, will what always be the same?
What must be, what's the condition that would make them the same when you see what in the question?
Sir, if the
The
overhead
overheads absorbed on the basis of direct.
Yes, when overheads are absorbed on the basis of direct labor hours. Now, what it's also saying, let me just go over that when overheads are absorbed on the basis of direct labor hours, it means that your environment is it's labor intensive. So let me ask you a question arising from that. We're departing from the variances for a while. When you're highly labor intensive, do you think that you have the best levels of efficiency?
No, your costs.
No, sir.
To be
No, you
higher.
won't. Your costs are going to be high. Output might take longer to be produced. There might be some attendant problems. Pardon?
No, I was saying the possibility of wastage could also be increased because you're using labor instead of machinery.
Yes. So those things would, you're more than likely operating in a highly inefficient environment when you're labor intensive. And what would flow from that is that your price might not be that competitive. Because what influences price? There are two things that influence price. Your profit, expected profit, and your cost. Because price is equal to cost plus profit. Price is equal to cost plus profit. So if your profits or if your costs are high, then invariably you're going to have a high price. And when you have a high price, then it means that, you tell me what it means if your price is high. Tell me what it means.
Not competitive.
You're what?
You're not competitive.
That's right. That's right. So you're not going to be very competitive if you have a very high cost or operating cost structure. And that high operating cost structure comes about with very inefficient, labor intensive. So of course we have to strive to move to minimizing labor and using the content of capital, machines to make the levels of efficiency. And let's pause because we just don't want to talk numbers. We want to then bring the numbers in and apply to your field. So HR sometimes is twinned in smaller organizations, it's twinned with things like industrial relations. So you might be aware that when you're moving from a highly manual to a highly mechanized, what's one of the things that happens?
You don't get the buy-in because people want to continue to be operating in the labor-intensive environment because it would mean more overtime and so on for them. They're taking a longer time to complete the task. Right. So you resistance, certainly from the unions to move to a more mechanized, automated environment.
Yes, the unions might not be so much for it, but in a sense, they are being short-sighted when they don't support it. Because you're going to lose some of the staff, yes, because you don't need that much staff now.
Right.
But those who remain behind operating in a more efficient environment, cost-effective environment, what happens when your costs lower? What does it do to profits?
You get higher profits.
You have higher profits. And out of that sustained higher profits, you can pay those who are left behind, you can pay them at a higher rate.
Yeah.
And what we need to do, let's talk a little bit about, let's step out of our thing and yet not fully step out of it. Companies can decide that they're going to make a policy to pay staff above. You know, there are surveys done to show what our accountants paid, what our marketing managers paid on average. You know, there are surveys like that.
Compensation.
Yes, sir.
So I can decide that if the average pay to an accountant with, say, 3 years experience and professional qualification is, I'm just going to call a figure, $7 million. I can decide that it's my policy, I'm going to pay somebody 8. But in deciding to pay above average, are there any benefits? Do you see any benefits arising from that?
Would that depend on what the structure is, whether some people are getting 7 and some people are getting 6?
Okay, maybe a policy now that you're going to
everybody
pay.
is getting the same.
Okay, and this can happen after a major redundancy. Because if you're good, there's certain things that you're saying when you're paying above average. If I'm paying above average, then I'm acknowledging that I have an above average staff.
The creme de la
It's
creme.
suicidal, pardon?
You have the creme de la creme. You have those.
You have the creme de la creme, that's correct. So if you decide to pay above average, after you look on your surveys, you see what each person is to be paid, and you decide that you're going to top it up by 5 or 10%. That can't happen. You can't do that with bad workers, people who don't care. And paying, let me tell you something, paying them 5% above the market rate or 10%, don't make them become automatically good workers. It doesn't. They have to be intrinsically good workers with the right ethic, work ethic.
Yeah.
So we might want to recruit for people with a track record of performance.
Right.
We might want to do that. Let's go for persons who have a high track record of performance. So at a certain level, management is headhunted. And we know what you mean by headhunted. We don't just come in and somebody applies for the job. You spear fish and you woo people. People who have a track record. We know some high profile persons in different areas, marketing, finance. We go for those persons and we woo them with better money. Right. Because you're making a statement to them, class. You expect a high level of performance. So in other areas of your studies, you're going to talk about the challenge of creating a high performance environment. Mm-hmm. The dialogue, the narrative for a high performance environment is about what you pay people, but there's something else as well. It is about the work ethic of the persons who you have on board. You don't just pay money to people. They have to give the organization something in return.
Add value.
Pardon, Belinda? And I want us to have a discussion right now. We get back to the numbers, I guarantee you, but let's have a discussion because postgraduate is about a discussion between lecturers and students and not just the lecturer speaking to the student.
So they would need to add value. They would need to.
They must add value if you're going to pay them as superior.
Themselves as a cut above the rest.
Because they're a cut above the rest. Why is the class silent? I'm going to ask that persons put their full name. So like Nicole, your name is not Nicole iPhone. So Nicole, can you just write your name, please? We take a register. So we're going to engage students. So it isn't just that people put up their computers and the worker were cooking the dinner. Everybody should be present. Everybody should be present. Chanel Coates.
Yes, sir.
What do you have to add to the conversation? Is there a downside? Let me ask you a specific question.
Yes,
is there
sir.
a downside to paying a superior salary? What I call an above par salary?
Well, sir, it depends on the context, because if you're going to pay employees a superior salary, although salary is supposed
Let's
to...
just define a superior salary.
Okay,
It means that when we look at the surveys, what do I pay an admin assistant? And we see the surveys saying that an admin assistant earns, let's say, $3.5 million. What if I now decide to pay my staff above the par? Is there any danger in that, Chanel?
well, sir, yes, there can be a danger because... Sorry, sir?
No, go ahead. I said, let's hear it.
So in terms of paying above average, it doesn't mean that your output will be any more than what another company might be doing. So although you're paying above average to be more competitive and to motivate your employees to actually work harder and become more efficient, there is no real true say that it will actually happen. So I think that the money is, instead of using all that money to pay above average, I think more money should be allocated in terms of training and development so that you can boost employees' efficiency, and that should yield better results for a company. And based upon their actual performance, then you would compensate them accordingly, sir.
But what about well-known persons who have a track record of performance? So let's take somebody like Don Webby, for example. We're calling names now.
Yes, sir.
Would you say that his stewardship at Grace Kennedy is above average, way above average?
Yes, sir.
So you know his track record?
Yes.
So if you want to woo him to your company, wouldn't you offer Don Webby, I'm being specific, salary above par, because you know of the track record of adding value to an organization?
Yes, sir, most definitely. In those contexts where you know the employees have a good track record, and even like if they aren't like those big names, but they're highly recommended by several organizations, and they have that track record, I think that you should definitely pay them accordingly. And if you think that they'll be a very good fit for the organizational culture as well, so you should definitely compensate them, because you definitely want that person to actually bring something else to your organization.
That's right. That's right. So in other words, you're not going to pay them above average and hope that they will deliver. You have to know that they have a track record of delivery.
Yes, sir.
So in that way, then the drawback is, the risk is minimized because you know the person's track record. And then we also have to create the environment for performance.
Yes, sir.
We have to create the environment for performance. These are things that I'm sure you're studying right now. You're creating the environment for performance, because it's so easy to have persons who are expected to do things and we don't give them the tools to do it.
That's true, sir.
And they fail. We set them up to fail. So make sure, as advocates for staff, what I call the staff ombudsman, that's what the HR manager is, make sure that you ensure that they are given the tools to perform. I asked the question.
Point, sir.
Go ahead, Novelet, go ahead.
No, I was saying, I was waiting for Chanel to finish to say that point you just raised is very critical in terms of creating the environment that supports efficiency, because you can very well attract a high-performing employee to your organization, and then they are all rearing to go. They put forward the ideas, the suggestion for reform or whatever it is to enhance the environment, but it doesn't get anywhere because the culture is as such where it doesn't foster the efficiency and so on. So you know that you want to go somewhere. The board knows that the organization needs to go to a particular place, but on the ground, it doesn't happen. So the environment is critical for any high-performing individual.
Yes. Okay. So my response to that would go something like this. When we go to an interview, we mustn't make it a one-way conversation. It must be a two-way conversation.
Mm-hmm.
What do we mean by that? The person who is being employed, the only thing that should proceed, the only thing that can't proceed from the mouth is how much you're going to pay me. I've learned that you negotiate not just for salary, you negotiate for budget as well. Because you and I know that money makes things happen. Money makes things happen. If I'm going to perform, let's take the University of the West Indies, their chief information officer. They have to have the budget. We know what has happened now. This is COVID time, so we're not seeing each other. But you're seeing me, I'm not seeing you, but you're seeing me. But we're not standing face to face. So what's one of the things that the university must do? They have to look on their IT capacity. And they have to see where it is, where it needs to be in the context of COVID and teaching, and what sort of budget needs to be had to get it there. Now, if you're going to be hired as a chief information officer, you're going to be driving this part of it. Or in some organizations, they call it a chief technology officer. Now, you're going to be driving at the strategic level IT. Well, what do you need to drive it? You need people and you need budgets. Because if the head of IT at the university don't have the budget to implement the IT strategy that's going to make teaching and learning operate at a very high level, then they'd have failed. You need the staff and you need the budget. So the conversation at the interview should speak to what sort of budget you need. And you, based on your vision that you have, you will be able to say what sort of budget will drive your vision. And so the conversation must speak to what sort of budget you're going to get. It can't only be about how much you're going to pay me. It must be about what sort of budget you are having for IT if you're the chief information or chief technology officer.
Your level of autonomy.
Pardon of that?
And your level of autonomy.
Well, I'd expect that if you're the chief technology officer, you're going to have a fair amount of autonomy, at least over your thing. But then you make a point, and I want to just expand on it. The culture of the organization is also important.
Mm-hmm.
When we go, gentlemen, when you go looking for ladies, when you go looking for gentlemen, you find out about their culture, their core values. I'm sure that that's one of the things in your mind. And then you ask yourself, do their core values align with mine? And when you go to a job interview, you're courting. Does the organization's core values align with my core values? So I'm suspicious of organizations that don't have articulated core values, clear core values that people know. You need to ask yourself, does this align with my values? And that's one of the things that you ought to use to decide whether you're going to work with the organization or not. What does the board represent? What does the senior management represent? And if you're going to be a part of senior management, you're looking at the table that you're sitting down with these people. And you and I know that you can be in a room full of persons, but you're lonely. Because the people's values and yours are totally different. Okay, so we went through all of this, and we're going to do it some evenings. I hope I didn't waste your time. Yes? No? It's bringing the context of the numbers and the culture into HR. We can't just turn numbers each evening. We have to talk about other things as well in the context of HR and organizations. So I hope this little departure was good. Okay, so we were looking at our variable overhead efficiency variance. And we recognized that we had 1,500,000 in the brackets minus 1,520,000. And in this case, we're going to multiply by, just scroll down, we're going to multiply by what's at the top. We're going to multiply by $37 per hour. 1,500,000 minus hours, don't forget the hours, minus 1,520,000 hours, and then we multiply that by $37 per hour, and that should give us $740,000. We recognize that we have used more hours than we planned to use, and therefore that is why it's going to be adverse. So when we look at the calculation for the variable overhead efficiency variance, it would be adverse. We have used more hours than we planned to use. Let's just go over, let me give you a formula for the variable overhead efficiency variance. Standard hours, open brackets, standard hours for actual production, standard hours for actual production, that was the 1,500,000, 20 times 75,000, minus actual hours, minus actual hours. Close brackets, multiplied by standard rate per hour. Now I'm going to give you another name for it. The standard rate per hour, which we acknowledge to be $37 per hour. That rate per hour, we call it standard rate per hour, but you can call it, take this name, I'm going to say it slowly, variable overhead absorption rate. Variable overhead absorption rate. That's a standard rate per hour. Variable overhead absorption rate.
Just a clarification. Are you saying that it can be used interchangeably?
Yes, yes, it can be used interchangeably. That's correct. Yes. That was Donna.
Belinda.
Belinda. Okay. So then we would get $740,000, and that would be adverse. $740,000, and that would be adverse. variable overhead efficiency variance. Now the variable overhead spending variance is equal to, open brackets, standard rate per hour minus actual rate per hour we close the brackets, and we're going to multiply that by the actual hours. We're going to multiply what's in the brackets by the actual hours. Let me ask a question. What is the standard rate per hour equal to?
37.
$37. Plus, I'm worried that I'm only hearing 2 students talking. Latanya Grant?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what is the actual rate per hour equal to?
$37 per hour, sir.
The actual rate per hour is equal to $37 per hour. How did you get that?
Sorry, $35 per hour, sir.
How did you get that figure, please?
Sir, I divided the 1.52 million by $53,200.
So you had 1,520,000 hours divided by 53,200,000. That's what you did?
Yes, sir.
Put that in your calculator and tell me if you get 35 or you get something else. You're putting your top to be 1,520,000. What we call the numerator, is that going to be 1,520,000? What's going to be the top?
Sorry, the 53 is the top, sir.
Okay, good.
Yes, sir, 35.
35, not this 35. How would you say it?
$35 per hour, sir.
$35 per hour. So then, what did we expect to pay Latanya?
We expected to pay $37 per hour.
Okay, and we actually paid?
$35 per hour.
Is this going to be a good variance, a favorable variance, or an adverse variance?
Favorable, sir, because we paid less than the expected.
That's right. And of course, so it would be $37 per hour minus $35 per hour in brackets. And we're going to multiply by 1,520,000 hours. And that would give us
Sorry, sir, I was muted. 3,040,000 favorable.
3,040,000 favorable. We're multiplying by the actual hours. Okay, and that's the variable overhead spending variance. Now the fixed overhead volume variance, let me give you the formula for that again. It's budgeted output, open brackets first of all, budgeted output minus actual output. Close brackets, multiplied by standard fixed overheads per unit, multiplied by standard fixed overheads per unit. Before we do the actual maths of it though, will this variance be favorable or adverse? You can know that.
Favorable.
Why is it going to be favorable?
Sir, because what you've actually produced is greater than what you expect.
That's correct. That is correct. We plan to have an output to produce 70,000 units, but we produced more. We produced 75,000 units, and that would make it a good thing. And so we know that it's going to be favorable. And when we multiply the 70,000 minus 75,000, in other words, we're multiplying 5,000 by what figure, class?
840.
By 840. But why not 42? Why not 42?
Because it's $840 per unit.
That's right, and we have units in the bracket.
And you're using units, yes.
That's right. Now, if we had hours in the bracket, then we would multiply by hours.
The hours.
But we don't have hours in the bracket, so we cannot multiply by. So what is our response, therefore? 5,000 units multiplied by $840 per unit would give us, I think, $4.2 million.
Favorable.
And it's favorable because we have produced more units. Let me ask a question though. What is the operative word in that formula, fixed overhead volume variance? What's the important word there?
Is it the volume?
The word that's important is volume. And Chantal, what we're measuring, Chantal? Chantal has left us. Okay.
Just coming on to ask you a question.
Yeah, coming to ask me a question?
Yes. For the fixed overhead volume, is bracket budgeted output minus actual output bracket times the standard fixed overhead per unit. But if the budgeted minus the actual is negative 5,000, as in adverse 5,000, why is it that way?
No. We must also take away from the teaching that we never speak, even though mathematically it might work out to be minus.
Oh.
We never pay that any mind at all.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
You know, I could have said to you actual output minus budgeted output. Next week I might tell you that. And whether I started one or the other, it's equally correct. And the answer would always be favorable because my actual output, whether I start with it first or afterwards, if my actual output is greater than the budgeted output, my volume variance will be favorable.
Because I was thinking about the negative, and I'm saying if it's negative, that means it's bad, which is adverse. So thank you, sir.
That doesn't count. It is looking at your budgeted, looking at your actual, and if the actual is greater, if I've produced more, intuitively we can appreciate it. If we produce more output, and volume means output, so that's why output is under scrutiny right here, and that's why it's in the brackets. If I produce more than the plan, then it must be favorable.
I understand. Logically, it makes sense, but I was just thinking about the maths in it. So I understand now. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. So The fixed overhead volume variance is budgeted output, open brackets, budgeted output minus actual output, close brackets, multiplied by standard fixed overheads per unit. Don't make the mistake. A lot of students make the mistake and multiply by 42, as in $42 per hour. But remember, 42 is per hour. But we don't have hours in our bracket. Notice that whatever we multiply by, that's what we have in the brackets. We relate that number to what's in the brackets. So if we have units in the bracket, we have to relate it to something per unit. If we have hours in the bracket, we must relate it to something per hour. We have kilograms in the bracket, we must relate it to something per kilogram. And if we go through all our workings, we'll see that we have been consistent that way. Now the fixed overhead spending variance. The fixed overhead spending variance. Tanya Smythe. Tanya absent. Okay, we mark her absent and move on. Marjorie Dunn, is that the name? Marjorie is absent as well. Okay. Can come and tell me tomorrow morning when you email and say I was present. Natisha, forgive me, pronunciation, Braham.
Yes, sir.
Who's responding? Natisha? Yes.
Hello?
Yes, I'm hearing you, Natisha. I'm hearing you. Okay. What formula did I give you last week for the fixed overhead spending variance? Can you share that with us, please?
No, you didn't give us a formula.
Okay.
Did you work fixed overhead spending variance?
No, sir. You said we should do it for homework.
sir,
You didn't give it to us.
So we have the fixed overhead spending variance from the previous problem tower. That's what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
So why did you sit so quietly and have me go on to look at another problem and that one wasn't working?
I thought you were waiting for us to reach here because you said it was for homework.
Okay, okay. And you would have researched it, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, and that was Introit Limited. Let's pause a while and let's go to the homework. We don't need to put the homework on the board. We would have done it already. What formula did you come up with for the fixed overhead spending variance? Going back to Introit. Let's go back to Introit and then we can come back to Lithuania.
So when I looked it up, I saw actual fixed overhead minus budgeted fixed overhead. Or if it is in the right sequence.
Okay, so you're saying what, Natasha? Natasha?
No, it's Colette.
Colette. How many of us did the homework though? Hold a minute. How many of us did the homework? Can we just enter into the chat and state whether we did the homework, please? Let's see. let's respond in the chat if we did the homework. Okay. A fair amount of you, but I still don't think it's 30 persons who did it. And a word to those who don't do homework. The students who don't do homework and have been around a long time, almost 100 years. They're the ones who have the harshest tongue, the harshest pen on the evaluation. Because there's a strong correlation between homework not being done and the final outcome. So to those who didn't do it, I want to say to you, you're walking on a very slippery slope, and I cannot take responsibility for the outcome if it is bad. For those of you who didn't do the homework, let this be the last time that you don't do the homework. Consistent slippages results in failure, and we're not going to be setting a special exam for students who have a poor track record of performance. You will come back next year. Do not waste all of these time and writer. It will not be granted unto you. Don't let me have to speak this harshly to any of you again. I want to commend those who at least attempted it, and more power to those who got it right when we go through it. But I will not students who do their homework and get it wrong, and not those who don't attempt it at all. And I think that that is reasonable. Okay, having said that, let's just go to the old one and look at it. We're looking at the fixed overhead spending variance, and I think, who was it who was about to advance a formula? I heard a student starting to advance the formula.
When I looked it up, I saw actual fixed overhead minus budgeted overhead, but when I actually did it, when I actually looked at your solution sheet, it seemed as if it was the other way around.
Doesn't matter, but okay. Who's speaking? I like to call names. Who's speaking?
It's Colette.
Colette, yes. Colette, it doesn't matter which one you put first and which one you put afterwards. So you might want to say actual fixed overheads minus budgeted fixed overheads. Or you might want to say budgeted fixed overheads minus actual fixed overheads. It doesn't matter which one you put first and which one follows. It is the meaning of it that would count.
Okay.
Meaning of it that counts. So go ahead. How do I calculate budgeted fixed overheads? Because the actual fixed overheads is how much, Colette?
The actual fixed overhead is 60,800,000.
Oh, no. Can we go back to the homework question, which would be introit? And then we get back to that afterwards. We come back to the other one, but let us look at introit, which was the homework question.
Okay. Oh, I don't have that up, but I have it in my book here as.
Yes, that's where I expect it to be at this hour. Go ahead.
All right, so I'm the actual, right? 9,650,000.
That's correct, yes.
Yes.
Minus
6.
Okay, pause.
Okay.
Those students who did it, just take out your paper and see if you're getting it right. You'd have had that close at hand. So I'm going to pause the class for a while. I think you would need more than 5 minutes to put your hand on that paper, the workings rather, and just pause a while, and I'll give you time to retrieve the workings and the question, and then we will get to it. Because I want it to be meaningful for everyone, but in particular, those who did the homework. Just type in the chat group when we found it, so I can follow, I can get a feel for. So you're going to say something like, I found it, and we're looking at your homework from Introit Limited. So then, let's have a conversation with Romain. Romain? Romain is absent. Okay, so I've remarked Romain absent. Nodian Simpson. Or is it Nady Ann Simpson?
Know the answer.
Yeah. It's Nady Ann or Nodian?
Know the Ann.
Nodian. Okay. Yes. Okay. Let me hear what you have.
For the homework?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
For budgeted fixed overheads, I had 16 million, and I got that by multiplying the 50,320.
50,000 times 320.
And the actual fixed overheads I had as 9,650,000, which gave me a figure of 6,350,000.
And that is favorable or adverse?
Favorable, because the overheads are less than you expected.
You expected to spend $16 million, and you actually spent less. You spent $9,650,000.
Yes, sir.
That would make it favorable. Take a formula. It is actual fixed overheads minus budgeted fixed overheads. And budgeted fixed overheads is equal to, budgeted fixed overheads is equal to budgeted output multiplied by standard fixed overheads per unit. Standard fixed overheads per unit. And please note that because we have units, we have to relate it to something per unit. The 50,000 is units, so we have to relate it to something that is per unit. It can be related to something that is per hour. Okay, so we can use the same principle now to look at the fixed overhead spending variance for Lithuania Limited. We can go to that. So we're back at Lithuania Limited. And we're going to ask Yashika Henry to give us the formula again in the context of Lithuania Limited. Is Yashika Henry there? She's Yashika? Yashika, absent. Okay. Okay, yes, Yashika. Can you give us the formula for the fixed overhead spending variance? Okay, that's okay, Yashika. Type in your response, please, and I will articulate it. Type in your response. Yashika, have you abandoned us? That's right, yes or no? Okay, that's correct. Now fill in the figures in the context of Lithuania Limited. Type in your figures now.
Excuse me, sir.
Okay, I'll take questions after she has done it. So you know your questions, welcome. Who is that speaking?
Giovanni.
Giovanni, yes. I'll take your question afterwards. After we have the numbers
All right, cool.
typed in, I will take a question. Yes, that's not right. Did I give a formula when we were working Introit Limited? Did I give you a formula? Did you follow the working for Introit Limited, Yashika? Yes or no? Okay. We're looking at the fixed overhead spending variance. So do you want to recraft your response? Because you can see that what you typed was out. So can you just now recraft your response to the question of fixed overhead spending variance?
Sir, Yashika finish, you know.
Okay. Sorry. Yes, that's correct. That's correct. 2 million and it's adverse. 840 times 70,000, that would give you 58,800,000. And that's budgeted, and we take from that 60,800,000. The actual is more than the budgeted, so we know that it's going to be adverse because the actual is more. It's 60,800,000. It's more than the budgeted, so it's 2 million and it is adverse. Okay. Let us break for 10 minutes, and when we come back, we're going to have a discussion on ideal standards and currently attainable standards. We break
Sir,
for
could you
10
come in?
minutes. Sorry, before we break, Giovanni.
Yes, sir. I was just asking for the fixed overhead spending. Does it matter which one come first? The budgeted or
No, it
actual?
doesn't matter.
Oh,
it doesn't matter. Whichever one comes first, it would still be, in the case of this one that we just worked, it would still have been adverse.
Okay. All right.
If you want to say budgeted minus actual or actual minus budgeted, that's quite fine. It would still be $2 million and it would be adverse.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Can you appreciate that? Why it
Yes,
would be
sir.
adverse anyway you take it?
Yes, sir. I can.
Okay, great. Any other questions, class? And then we can break. Sorry about that. Any other questions?
No,
Any
sir.
response? Okay, well, let's break. We come back at 7:44. Come back, 10 minutes break. We come back at 7:44. Okay. Marsha, you're going to say something?
No, sir. I was just telling you no other questions.
Okay, then. Thanks. Good evening, class.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Nicole Spike. Nicole Spike.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Checking to see if you're awake still.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. I'm up.
Okay. Let me now ask you, what is an ideal standard?
It's the best condition, operating condition based on the solution that you gave us, sir. It's the best possible operating conditions, with no material wastage, no stoppage or idle time. In short, it's the perfect efficiency.
Mm-hmm. Could you apply the ideal standards to your workplace?
If
You
I would
work in a
say,
manufacturing environment?
yes, sir.
You work in a manufacturing environment.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that example could apply.
Yes, sir.
But let's stretch your mind a little. Suppose you worked in a bank. How ideal standards would play themselves out?
No idle time, sir. Probably we could have the tellers or customer service attending to customers in short period of time. Sir, am I on the right track?
Say that again. Say that
I
again.
was saying that the tellers or customer service rep
Yes.
attend to customers in short period of time.
Okay, so there is
as
no
quickly as quickly as they can, sir.
So there are no overrun of time in dealing with a customer. That might be one of the things that would be an ideal standard.
Yes, sir.
We never go over the time because in banks, they have standards for time taken to open an account, time taken for a teller to deal with a customer. They have things like that. So those are the standards.
Yes, sir.
So if we look on that, then we could say, if we're trying to apply ideal standards to a bank, we would say no overrun of time in dealing with customers. What else in a bank we could say would make it an ideal standard?
So I'm thinking.
Yes, that's fine. That's fine. I like thinking students.
Sir, what about the efficient running of the machines?
What machines? The washing machine?
Sir, like the computers, make sure they are up to date. So they don't move slowly or they operate efficiently and effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So it would take like less time to process a transaction, for example.
Okay. Who heard what happened at Scotiabank over the weekend? I think it was. We heard what happened?
No, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we were looking at a situation where the rate of exchange, I think it was the US dollar, was calculated at something like 4.29 to 1 Jamaican dollar. That was an error. So more than likely there was a programming error, but an error took place. And so people paying their credit card, a higher rate was used, so more Jamaican dollars came out of their account. And of course, some persons were left embarrassed because all of the money came out. And so nothing was left to pay, meet other commitments. That's an error. So with ideal standards, that wouldn't take place. No errors would take place, whether of a human nature or a mechanized nature. People would come to work on time. There'd be no late coming. There'd be no incorrect giving of cash. So if you're to get $10, you're going to get $10. There'll be no overage or underage of cash at the end of the day when tellers balance. All of those things point to an ideal standard. No errors, no late coming, no breakdown of machines, perfect efficiency. And then we have, what's the other standard that the question spoke to?
Absences, sorry.
Pardon?
Now I was adding no absences.
No absent people come to work. Nobody's absent. Nobody's late. Okay, so what else? Okay, let's now move to what is a currently attainable standard? Sabrina Ramdon, is Sabrina there? Sabrina is absent from our class this evening. Okay. Marked absent. Katharina? Katharina is absent as well.
Hello, sir.
Oh, you're there. Okay. What is a currently attainable standard? Explain that to us, please.
Okay, sir. Based on what I read, the currently attainable standards are those activities or those standards which can be achieved under less than favorable conditions. Yeah, in the work environment. So it makes room for the inefficiencies, the delays, or any breakdowns in the production environment.
So less than perfect conditions.
Yes, sir. Sir?
Yes, I'm hearing you. You said something else?
No, I didn't. I didn't say anything else.
Okay. Okay, let's see who is here and who is not here. You know, the computer is up. So Katharina spoke a while ago. Sabrina is not here. She fell asleep. Novlet? Is Novlet here or asleep?
I'm with you.
Okay. What else do you have to add to currently attainable standards?
It's kind of the opposite of ideal standard and is the most frequently used because though it is based on efficiency, as Katharina said, it makes allowances for other unexpected events, I would call them, like wastage, downtime, and so on, as opposed to ideal standards.
Yes.
So earlier you spoke about high performance cultures and so on. I think the currently attainable standards are really based on high performance because they focus more on efficiency and the fact that you have to work to achieve the level of performance required.
Okay. So I want to ask another question now to you, Novlet. Can we throw ideal standards through the window?
No, I wouldn't throw it through the window, but when I
Why
read
not?
it,
But why not throw it through the window?
because I don't like throw things through the window, but but when I read it, it sounded too perfect.
Yes.
And it cannot be a perfect scenario when you're dealing with people and machinery.
Yes.
You know, so that was my drawback with it. But who is to say that in the future you can't attain ideal standards?
Okay, I think you're onto something great because ideal standards gives us something to work towards.
Yeah.
I'm going to use a term and it's called Kaizen costing. A Kaizen environment is one of continuous improvement. We're evaluating. So this is where we were today. We want to be in a better place tomorrow. And we then begin to talk about how do we get to that better place? And so what the ideal standard gives us something to work towards. We know we'll never be perfect. but we want to work towards perfection. Not because we know we'll never be perfect. We throw it through the window. We can't bother, we don't want to work towards perfection because we know we're never going to be perfect. We will never, ever not be late for work. But what we want to do, we want to minimize the lateness for work. So let's suppose that we're in a factory setting and there's a shift that starts at, let's say, 6 in the morning. The buses might be late. So how can we work to minimize lateness for the first shift? Because it has implications for productivity of the first shift. We might say that we're going to arrange to pick up the staff on the first shift.
Yes.
Because if you have to get to work at 6 o'clock and you live in Portmore and the factory is in Kingston, you might be able to get, you need to be out probably from 4 o'clock, but no bus is running at 4 o'clock. But let's suppose that we arrange to have transport picking up the staff. That can minimize lateness, you know.
Absolutely, and quite a number of manufacturing organizations do that to minimize the lateness, especially for early shift.
Yes, that's right. So you can minimize lateness. It doesn't mean that lateness won't take place, but it's less likely to take place if they're not depending on the public transportation.
Public.
Of course, the driver of the bus or the bus can oversleep one morning and cause everybody to be late. But you create something that takes you closer to that point of perfection. Machines can break down. So what do? You have, you make arrangements, you have a timetable for servicing the machines. Because we know that if machines are not serviced, just like your car, if you don't take it to the mechanic, frequently, you know it's going to break down. It's going to leave you on the road at an inopportune moment. So we work towards minimizing that by ensuring that we have scheduled, programmed, scheduled maintenance. We might arrange on weekends, we're going to pull down the machine and maintain it because production takes place from Monday to Friday. So where is no production on Saturday and Sunday, we can use the downtime to maintain your machines. But we're in a constant state of improvement. Something like your customer satisfaction survey. We can decide that we got 54% in it. We now have to set a target to move to 60. We're not saying we're to move from 54 to 100% because there's something called unrealistic targets. We need to have targets, but they must be realistic. They must be smart, specific, measurable, attainable, and things like that. So then, time bound. Okay, so what we're saying is that we have our targets, but they must be realistic. And we seek to improve the targets when we fall short of them. So the role of the ideal is to give us something to work towards. We know we'll never get there, but we want to get to that point where as close as possible to the ideal. And that's the role of the ideal. And so one of the things that can get us as close as possible to the ideal, even there will be errors, we're going to recruit staff with a track record for performance where they're coming from, and all the other places that they have been. And then we can arrange what we call coaching programs in our organization, driven by HR. So I know about a law firm, and all the associates, that's the junior lawyers, they're coached, they're attached to a partner in the firm. Now, what's the thinking behind that? You have the partner, And the partner became partner because the partner mirrors the values of the organization. And if you hang out and you're close to people, then the values of the organization will be transmitted from the partner who you're attached to you. And when an organization's values are shared by all, you have a much more cohesive organization. And when there's cohesion in the organization, we all know that goals, it's easier to realize the goals of the organization. So that's the role of the ideal standard. It helps to shape what is an acceptable standard today is not an acceptable standard tomorrow. Did I tell you when I first went to England in 1940 on SS Windrush? It took me 3 hours to get there. I told you that, right?
You?
Hold on, what?
On the banana boat.
You was on Windrush?
SS Windrush, yes.
Oh, really?
So it took me 3 weeks to get there, but now it takes 9 hours to get to the UK. But it was all of 3 weeks. All of 3 weeks. Or 504 hours as against 9. So standards change. And we need to build an organization that works towards how we can improve it. So look on your results. This is what was scored in the staff satisfaction survey. How are we going to, what strategies are we going to implement to improve our staff satisfaction survey? And we know what the staff satisfaction survey measures. Sophia? Sophia? Sophia Montague, is Sophia there? She's absent. Ramona, is Ramona back or is Ramona still absent?
I'm here, sir.
You're there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What's your staff satisfaction survey? What does that show?
The level of satisfaction within the organization.
Yes. Okay. Share with us some of the things that you can do for the organization to score high. What are some broad strategies you'd implement?
I think one, communication, how we communicate with staff and the availability of information, because oftentimes employees can be dissatisfied because of lack of knowledge. So communication could help. Certain benefits that are offered to staff. Over time, those sometimes we have to review those benefits, whether they're basically adding value to employees to increase, or whether some things are irrelevant. So, for example, when you think about health benefits, and you probably have staff that does not benefit a lot from maternity under the health benefit. You might need to review it and see where do you put the bulk of the benefits on the card. So more persons maybe be doing optical or dental. So you review your policies, your health benefits, and see where you can allocate more benefits to satisfy.
So if by chance most of the females in the organization are, let's say, 37, then you know that the whole thing about maternity would not be so much an issue. So you'll probably want to negotiate with the insurance carrier to skew more of it towards, you're saying, health, to eye or dental or optical. Okay, yes. Okay, let me ask Alani or Alani.
Good night, Mr. Roof.
Okay. Okay. Okay, we are noting some issues here. Just pausing a while, we have to listen to these things. Okay. Okay, just looking at some of the responses. So we're back to you, class. It's good to just look in the chat screen every now and then. Okay. Sorry. Alani, is Alani there? Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing names.
Good night, sir.
Good night, yes. What else would we do to improve our staff satisfaction survey?
To improve the survey or to improve
The
their
results of the
satisfaction?
survey. The results of the staff satisfaction survey. What are some of the other things we could do? Broad strategies. Clearly, they'll be driven by what's in it, but since we don't have one in front of us, what are some of the things that we could address?
I'll have to go with my colleague. I agree with her in terms of communication is one issue that I could come for. Technology, implementation of.
What about technology?
Well, there are various resources that you could provide to employees to make them feel more engaged or to better perform, such as maybe their work is labor intensive and there are tools that if the institution or the organization invest in them, it would make them happier or spend less time at work and more balancing of their life, and that might make them more satisfied. So that's one or two things that you could consider. Compensation review, in that compensation, not just basic salary, benefits and other things that they may have highlighted in the survey. The culture might need to be reviewed or changed. That would take some work, that would not be overnight. But that could be something that is affecting how they feel about the organization. They may not be enjoying the company's culture. And whether or not we could create opportunities for them to be heard. Feedback, maybe they don't feel that their feedback is something that is listened to, or their solutions or their suggestions are not implemented. So those are some of the things I believe we could do.
Yes. So often we build a culture where we go through the motions. Now, it is true that you cannot listen and implement everything that people say, because some of it is nonsensical. Some of it is driven by selfishness. So we can't necessarily implement all the things that your staff tell you that they want. I remember listening to one person once say they want to be off on their birthday. You can't always send the staff off on their birthday. Just think about it. Let's suppose that the end of the financial year coincides with your birthday, or pretty close to the auditors coming in and you have schedules to do. Can you go off on your birthday? The answer is no. But maybe in recognition of the work being done now, it might be that you go off on your birthday, but in recognition of the work being done, one of those companies overseas, they had a staff really on the treadmill for like 3 weeks straight, working long hours. And they said to the staff, in a particular unit, they said, don't come to work tomorrow. I think it's a Monday. They said to them, don't come to work tomorrow. We appreciate what you have done. And when you think of it, you know, the hours that they had added up, the extra hours that they had worked, probably came up to a month of work. And when we have situations like that, we're not saying be responsible and tell people not to come to work when a whole lot needs to be done. When there's a lull in the work, we can say to the unit, don't come to work today, in recognition of the fact that they have done hours of work, sometimes without overtime. Don't come to work today. Today is our unofficial public holiday in recognition of the work that you've done. I remember another manager saying to me that in his interview he has an interview with his staff when he does the staff evaluation. And he tries to get into their mind. And of course, to get into anybody's mind, they will only give you a part of their mind if they trust you. He wants to know where they see themselves in the organization 5 years from now. Because that can help you to skew the training. That can help you to look out for areas where there's a vacancy. I could employ somebody in accounting whose heart is really in marketing. It's good, especially if you have trainees, management trainees, or interns who you intend to employ on a full-time basis. You want to know where they have that, where is their interest in the organization? Is it in marketing? Is it in operations? Is it in HR? Is it in finance? Where is it? Because if we can create a staff that enjoys what they do, let's say if you enjoy what you're doing, you've never worked a day in your life. And can we, by our policy, by our flexibility, get our staff to that point where they're working, but they don't feel like they're working? Do we build into our culture where it's not just managers who are evaluated, it's not just the staff, the lower level staff who are evaluated, but we also evaluate those who are managers? Because the junior staff can give some indication to the senior staff about how they can improve. The answer doesn't only lie in the senior staff. The way forward can lie in the junior staff. And to what extent do we listen to our junior people about reasonable criticisms about the management team? Or is it vindictive behavior after the criticism? So I think I spoke to you last week about having surveys being done that are anonymous, because what you want the feedback. You want feedback from your staff, the junior staff, about the senior staff, because it could shape the training that we send our senior managers on. It might be technical knowledge that we're giving them, but it might be some of the softer skill training that they need to make them effective in terms of leading the staff. Any questions?
Mr. Roof, I don't particularly like to speak in class. It doesn't mean anything. However, my concern with those suggestions on making staff feel satisfied is that usually it seems as though this is being said to HR, but HR always has a fight to get or to implement some of these things, because majority of the managers in organizations think about cost and money only, not to the detriment of productivity, without even sometimes realizing. I have observed that in MBA programs, they're trying to implement or put in the curriculum more human resource management. And I think that is good, but many managers do not think from that perspective. For example, for my staff for this year, I got approved a birthday day off, but it was just for this year, it's just for 2020, in that they're going to assess the cost and all of that, which is fine. However, it was from the feedback of the staff, and it doesn't have to be on their birthday. It can be taken up to 3 months after or 3 months before, on the premise that everybody can go off on their actual birthday. However, it was a struggle to get it because nobody understood the value that one simple additional leave could have on the staff. So I think it is all well and good for us in HR to get these things, but I think there are many other programs that need to have an understanding of human motivation, theories and other things, just from a UE or other schooling standpoint. Many managers do not think that way.
Okay, my response is, if you can show the impact of, in other words, a lot of us ask for things, you know, and we can't show how it will benefit the organization and benefit, because I believe in a win-win paradigm. I want us as managers perish the thought that for me to win, you have to lose. I like the concept of the win-win. I win, that is the organization win, and the staff wins as well. We need to create that environment. So if you can show, and this really calls for research, if you can show where sending the staff off on their birthday or 3 months, I have a little danger, and you did qualify it by saying it need not be on the day of the birthday, because the truth is the organization might have major deadlines on the day of my birthday or on the day of your birthday. So it might not be on the strict birthday period. But if they can get a day off, because it is reckless and irresponsible for me to send persons off on their birthday if they play an integral role in achieving a particular deadline. Would you agree with that? Hello?
Fully agree, sir. They don't have to get it on their birthday. It has to be approved and planned for. You don't have to get it on their day. But I would never do anything to harm the institution. Yeah, I would never do anything to harm the organization. My role as HR is a balance. I am there for the organization and for the staff.
Yeah.
I can't be staff if the staff want to burn down the place, but and I can't be for the management team or admin only if they want to harm the staff. So
I agree. I think you said it well, and you took the thoughts from my mind. You can't have them endorse them burning down the organization, but you cannot also endorse management hurting the staff. And I think that in that statement is the whole role that I see HR as a part of the role. You are the ombudsman for the staff while building the organization. There's an integral link that we miss, you know, and it is that if the staff is happy, we can get a lot out of them. If the staff is happy, we get a lot out of them. So how do we bring our staff to that point where they will do for the organization while being done for? Organizations have now realized that if I'm demanding a lot from you, then I need to give you the vitamins to keep you healthy so that I can demand a lot from you. So have you wondered about why some organizations, they have gyms? Because if I need you to work extra hours. You need to be fit. Have you ever wondered why some organizations have nurseries and holding areas for children? Because if I have you at work at 6 o'clock and your child is at the nursery and the pickup time is 6 o'clock at the nursery, do you think I can get the best out of you? Do you think your mind is on the work when your child is at the nursery, probably the last one there? Or at school, the only one at school because the teacher has gone home? You're not going to get the best from them. So watch it from the start. So what the organization needs to do, and these things are extremely important, especially if we just use the example, especially if we have a lot of persons with children. Then we need to ensure that if we want the best out of the staff, their parents as well, they're not going to feel good if their children are left at school long after closing time. We need to create that place for them, that safe space for them, where they can be doing homework supervised. They can be, if they're younger children, they're in a nursery setting where they can be fed and that sort of thing. It will have a cost, but if people are productive, they can generate. I'm going to tell you a comment that somebody made about Scotiabank. They said nobody leaves Scotiabank. And I can tell you something about Scotiabank. The hours are long. They pay people well, but they work hard. I know other organizations where their deadline's tomorrow. The deadline is met, but people are leaving work at 4:30. And it speaks about the organization because there are no consequences flowing from you turning up the following day with a deadline not met. Are you hearing my class?
Yes, sir.
So in order to lift our standards, we have to lift our people. And even before that, you know, one of the things that we have to do, we have to recruit right. So we have to recruit persons who share the organization's values. We have to do the right recruitment that picks up who people really are. I remember going through really as part of a panel, looking on a questionnaire. And that questionnaire, believe you me, it was designed to trick person. It asked you the same questions many ways. And if you weren't genuine, you'd fall on some of those questions. And when we spot people who are inconsistent, that's a sign for us that we don't employ them. But we have to have clear values. And we recruit on those values. Because no matter how good you are, if you have the wrong person on board, things not going to work out. And we, in turn, must be respectful of our staff. We must listen to them. And of course, clearly, we have to make a distinction between reasonable requests and unreasonable requests. And of course, we have to respond based on the resources at our disposal. And that's why I believe that for a lot of, or some organizations at least, the road is it's an uphill journey, because the things that you really need to make staff happy, a lot of them cost a lot of money to implement. And if you're not making the money, then it's hard to implement some of these things. I talk about the gym, I talk about the nursery for children, but those are expensive propositions. And the companies I know that have those things, there are companies that make billions in profits. I can think of two that readily come to mind, JMMB and NCB and Scotia, but they make billions in profits. If you're not making that sort of money, then it's going to be hard to either pay gym fees or to set up a gym and staff it for the staff. So the companies that are strapped for cash have a more difficult time delivering on certain fronts. But you can deliver on some of the fronts. It don't take money to deliver in terms of communication and respect.
Exactly, so I was going to come to that point because
who's that?
I said I was
Just
going to
identify yourself, please.
Giovanni.
Giovanni, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was going to come to that point because sometimes it's not all about the monetary aspect of it, you know. Sometimes employees just want to hear, they want their voices to be heard, and that alone can help to boost the morale. Like if I give a suggestion, it might not work, but let me know that you take the suggestion and you're going to look into it, even though you know in the back of your head that, you know, this not going to work. Don't just put me down right then and there. If I have a concern, like working out a concern can definitely help an employee. It's not like I'm going to come to you and I say, sir, I'm having a problem, and you're just going to put me down right then and there. Like,
okay, what we could, I could do, okay, let's use you and me as an example, a hypothetical one. What we could do, I could probably show you why that won't work. I don't have to put you down, but I'm going to show you why it can't work, if it can't work. And we can have a discussion. Maybe you can show me why it can work. But there's something I want to say. I've said it to all the other groups about managers. Managers have to have broad backs. So when you're criticized, you're not going to victimize people. You're going to listen to them. And so one of my favorite managers, I won't call her name, but she was evaluated and she got a poor evaluation from her staff. And she took them on a weekend. It was a departmental retreat. And her words to them was, we have a problem. And I just love it. I found it classic. We have a problem. Why we? Because if you score me low, well, I have a problem because I'm not going to get the bonus as a manager. And you have a problem because you have a problem with me. So there's nobody that's happy. And so what she said to them is, how can we fix our problem? And I just find it very classic. A wonderful response to a problem. She didn't take them and begin to trace them. We have a problem. Because one of the things that I want us to acknowledge is that there's a team approach. There is no me and you. It's a team approach. If you don't do well, it looks badly on me in the context of our class. And you have to pay the fees again. And that's why I get on badly about these things. That's why you're scolded for those who didn't do the homework. You lose, and I lose. So there's a team approach. And so there's no one person who fails. In your team, if the team didn't meet its deadline, everybody failed. Not John Brown. We all fail. And therefore, one of the things that we also have to build in the team culture is how do we help people up on a day when they're down? How do we help people to meet their targets? Because some people pay based on group performance. You have group bonuses. You have a group bonus. So to get the group bonus or to maximize the group bonus, everybody needs to perform well. So what it means is you need mentors, or sometimes it don't have to be the boss who says it. It can be your colleague who says it to you, the person who is at your level, who says it to you, your peer who says it to you. You need to put forward a better game. Because if you lose, we lose. let's suppose that the organization has a competition, best department, and best department translates to extra money for all members in that department. If one person falls down, they shut the team, and the team is robbed of whatever extra the individuals could earn. So we have to help people to achieve.
But sir,
imagine building that culture in an organization. Let me pause to hear what somebody is saying.
Yes, Giovanni again.
Yes.
But if somebody is constantly, so it's a group effort, but there's always somebody or probably two persons who carries down the group. Probably they just don't know how to do the work properly. So doesn't this link back to training? Like probably at the beginning they just weren't trained properly or something along that line. So, you know, if you weren't trained properly, you just can't.
Or maybe not. Maybe don't have the aptitude for that job that the team calls for. And that is why we need to spot people early, train them. So we don't just train people. I hear that comment being made so often about Burger King, for example. They don't have no customer service skills. I say you can't blame the people, you know, because they were just thrown on the front line and they weren't trained. You know that I'm told that there are certain organizations that train the security guard. And initially my comment, why are you training the security guard? Because the security guard don't work with you. He's not on your payroll. But guess what? The security guard, if you have a certain standard for your organization, let's suppose you want your security guard to, you want the customers to feel like kings and queens. A part of them feeling like kings and queens is simply having the security guard open the door for them. If that is that's part of your core values, then you would have to train the security guard to do those things. What is the expectation that you have of service? Part of service is to open the door for your staff. I see at Scotia, when the rain falls, they have an umbrella if you don't have your umbrella, and the security guard walks you to your car with the umbrella so you don't get wet. That's part of customer service. And then there are degrees in which we define customer service. If your bar is low, that mightn't be on your radar. But if you have a high bar, that will be on your radar.
Could I say something too?
Certainly, of course.
Yeah, I was just looking at the whole thing about team performance that Giovanni raised. The thing is, look at a football team. Today might not be my day, but I did contribute something, and the team won. I might even have been sent off, for 2 infringements on the day, but the team won. I'm still part of a winning team. Tomorrow might be my day, and I might score 3 goals. I might have a hat trick or something like that, and we won 3-0. So tomorrow might be my day, and the whole team wins, even though I was the only performer. And yesterday, I was actually sent off, or the day before, the 2 matches before, I was sent off for some infringement. I was still part of a winning team. So I don't have to be at my best every single day. I agree that we must move forward. We must all be moving forward, but we don't move forward at the same rate every time, every day. We're not at 100% every day. So sometimes you see this thing about 2 members always bringing the team down. Then the team needs to look, as I said, we have a problem if two members are consistently.
Always is that operative word.
Yes.
Always.
Yeah, but if you have people who are significantly weaker than the rest of the group, and they remain significantly weaker than the rest of the group, it is a group problem. It is not the people's problem per se, because then the group needs to begin to think about, do they separate from these people if it is an attitudinal problem? But if it
Yes.
is a problem for you know,
Capacity.
aptitude, if it's, yes, capacity and aptitude, if that is the problem, then it is a group problem.
It
And
is
the
a
other
group
members
problem.
of the group must take some responsibility for raising those persons.
Yeah, that's a valuable input. Valuable input. I want to know, say that the organization owes it to the staff to try with them first. As you're quite right, you made that distinction between attitude and aptitude. And we work with people who have the capacity issues. We try to build them.
Yes.
Or in some cases, we call institutional
What?
building.
Sir, what some companies do, they just shuffle them around continuously without actually trying with them. And what they do, they just spread the negative behavior throughout the organization, and that doesn't help in the long run.
Okay, so you need to really do an analysis. You need to study that problem, because sometimes it's the boss really who is the problem, you know. And you just give that person a different boss and they shine. Because some managers can bring out the best in some more than others. So moving them around might help the problem, but you have to study the problem first. Because if the problem lies within the person, then moving them around not going to improve the situation at all.
And they do, what they do, they don't, what the organization I'm referring to, what they don't speak to the persons. You just go to work one morning and you're advised that so-and-so will no longer be in your department. And they just move the person. So there's no conversation with the person. There's nothing to say, we're gonna move it to this department to see how you fit or anything. So what you find is that this negative energy is right throughout the organization, because everybody has been shuffled around, because some they may not be performing or they have an attitude issue, so they just get shuffled around.
Yes. And what it really points to is on the part of management, because in
weak management.
I want to blame management first.
Trust me, that one is weak
managers
management.
Don't like confrontation. And I don't mean confrontation as a negative confrontation. Confrontation is looking somebody in the face and saying, you are not meeting your end of the bargain. That is the confrontation I'm talking about. Some people don't like to bring unpleasant news, bad news to people. But as a manager, you have to have that ability. Nobody likes to do it, but you have to rise to the occasion and do it. There are people who prefer to talk about people behind the back, the non-performance behind the back, rather than tell them to their face, respectfully, I must submit, that these are the shortcomings that are affecting the performance of the body.
Because a manager, add something, sir?
Yes, certainly.
I think for some managers, they don't want to make the hard decisions. Because in some cases it means termination. So they say, okay, let's move you here and see if you will be a better fit there.
Okay,
sometimes
and
it's
but that might be a good barring that you steal money or you're rude or so. That might be a good way initially. But maybe if you spoke to the person, you'd get to the root of the problem. So you wouldn't have to be experimenting. Because when you move,
as you said, some of them don't want the confrontation. So they just want to pass on the responsibility.
It's no longer my problem, but it is now your problem.
Well, sir, once I had a staff like that who she just wouldn't perform, and they kept telling me to move her around. I put her in another department. She wasn't doing well, so I took her back and I sat her down and I asked her, what's your issue? She actually didn't like her job. She wanted to own her cook shop. So I said to her, well, you need to go and do a baking course or food and nutrition course. And eventually she left, because that's not where she felt comfortable.
Yes.
So she was doing a bad job at it. But then I realized that they wanted to shuffle her around. So I said, no, let me talk to her.
Yes.
And she really didn't want to be there.
Mm-hmm.
But I guided her to get out. You understand? So
I want to tell you, to share with the group, I can't call any names. This is a very high profile person. And they were in a particular job and doing badly at it. And their boss called them in the office one day and wrote the resignation for them. And as a young person, they wept. I mean, can you imagine losing a job? But then later on said, years later on, they said they had to thank that person for doing that because it opened that door for them. And they were able to move into, they had talents that they had not yet recognized. And they were able to move into their area and move into an area that brought them great fulfillment and national recognition. If they had stayed in a particular place, they would not have realized. And so you have to thank that manager. I'm sure many people thought that her boss was cruel. Send home the person. In sending them home and writing the resignation and having her sign it, it was able to open up new doors for her that brought her untold fulfillment. So sometimes as managers, we're going to become managers one day if we are not yet managers. Make sure that when you make those so-called cruel, and I use it in inverted commas, cruel moves, make sure that it is not governed by hate and malice, but governed by wanting the best for people in the long run. And I said that it was Marsha probably who made a comment about that girl who was in the job that she didn't like. The truth is this, that I like that approach. You have a conversation with people. Why it is that they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And then when we're armed with information, we can make decisions. We can make decisions. I want to say that the truth is that if you want your jobs, you have to back for it. If you want your job, you have to back for it. I sat on a panel recently and they were saying that, boy, you can't send home the people because it's COVID time and they won't have any money. But I said, these people not meeting their end of the bargain at all. They're disrespectful to their boss. The boss asked them for reports and not giving any reports. If you want your job, you have to back for it. You have to work for the job to keep it. And if you're not doing it, then people will, you can't blame if they send you home. So it's a it's a two-way street, and we all have responsibilities. The boss has responsibilities, the subordinate has responsibilities. Because at the end of the day, you're working for an organization that you want to build up. But in building up the organization must share some of the takings with the staff. Otherwise, the staff will not do its best.
Sir, if I might you mentioned.
Go ahead.
You mentioned earlier, this is Debbie. You mentioned earlier about the effect of culture on that process. And I find too, particularly in some government organization, there's this perception that once you're appointed, you're there for life until you decide. It's hard for want of a better way of phrasing it, it's hard for anybody to get you out of that job once you're appointed.
Yes, I've heard that line, yes.
And so it often boils down to the very thing that you spoke of, management being open to giving the feedback, the necessary feedback, and taking the necessary steps to ensure that if there's an issue, you're following the step of assisting first to find out if you can help this person get over this hump.
Yes.
If it is a competency issue, and if it is even if it's an attitude issue, whether or not you can assist this person, as Marsha said, could be because I don't enjoy my job anymore. I don't want my job, but it cannot be the excuse for poor performance or consistently poor performance. And so I find that management on a whole sometimes do not take the steps that they need to take to ensure that they're documenting along the way, so that when that time comes, you can say, all right, we've done X, Y, and Z. We need to now consider separation at this point.
Yes, there's a documentation that defeats separation so often.
Yes.
And of course, your earlier point about what we call tenure. At the university, we call it tenure. You have almost employment for life. When you have tenure in the civil service, as you use that, that's something that we're going to that the permanent secretaries or whoever who lead that conversation going to have to talk about with the unions in the civil service. That, guess what? Nobody can be there for life. You're going to have to perform or you go. You perform or you go. Clearly, underperformers are going to help you to step up your game. But if after doing that, you're not stepping up your game, there comes a time when we just have to cut you. And as they're contemplating a new type of civil service, a transformation in the civil service, that transformation that we're talking about, central to it, cannot be the whole thing about permanent employment till you decide to go. That cannot be a part of the equation at all. It's going to have to be a leaner, better paid, and high performance civil service. Leaner.
Absolutely true, sir.
High performance. And with that will come better pay.
And accountability. I think accountability is one of the
yes.
Another big issue. Sometimes I will tell some of my coworkers, you could not work for private sectors because you work for government where you behave like the way you behave.
But you see, again,
private sector, you will be fired immediately.
That's true. Let's talk about one of the things that the civil service is guilty of. They're guilty of many things. One of the things is late accounts. Accounts not filed. I remember going to a meeting once and hearing some people talking. And by the way, they were not. You know, you can be guilty of something and you sound shocked. They were totally unfazed by the fact that they had 7 years of accounts not yet tabled in Parliament. They were not fazed at all by that reality. And why is that so? Because it is tolerated. Just remember that what gets measured gets done. If you're in charge of a ministry as a permanent secretary or a principal financial officer, and you have years of accounts behind, or your accounts which must be ready 4 months after year end, which would put it at the 31st of July, and they're not ready, and nothing happens, at risk Kennedy, something would happen because you'll be listed by the stock exchange.
Sir.
Yeah, but sir. Sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
All right. I'm thinking that for private sector, it's a bit different because usually the conditions that you work in government, lack of resources, you have to be pinching everything, you have to be, I don't know, it's a little bit harder, I think.
It is hard.
So for that reason, I think that's why you have that relaxed, I think, because it's really difficult working in government.
But a part of that problem is how budgets are prepared as well, you know. So
and Marsha,
accountability in government.
That's right.
So and what Lacey is saying, sir, most of the government agencies are stuck in their old ways, in the long paper pushing and the long processes to do things. For example, in the news recently, where they have police death benefits being delayed for up to 6 years. So, I mean, some of these things is that the processes are so long and extenuating that it just get dragged out for years.
Yeah, and everything is so manual. Everything is manual.
Exactly.
Private sector does more Well, they have more resources then too.
They have more resources, but a part of the failure of government, by the way, private sector isn't perfect, you know. So let's just say that and let's move on. They have their own issues too, and sometimes the issues about performance. But back to government, since that's where the discussion resides, or you know, started there. Sometimes it's the will to do things rather than in the resources. The leadership that you have determines what happens in an institution.
One at the top.
Absolutely.
If you have a CEO or a permanent secretary who is laid back or who don't feel accountable, then you're not going to have a lot of things happening. And of course, one of the things that we have, we talk about how people get promoted in jobs. And most times we promote people based on loyalty rather than performance. So I want to commend a word to you as you build your culture, and it is meritocracy. You look up the word. It is the rule of the deserving. People being promoted based on track records, strong track records of performance. When that is what causes promotion, then you're going to find that the outcomes are different from when it is because we are friends why we are promoted. We go to the same church. Organizations can tell you about that. We go to the same church. Pardon? Old Boys Club. Things like that that promote you rather than performance.
Sure, sometimes government organizations too have a reactive approach to things. We're not very proactive. Even with our own, as Marsha mentioned, the budgeting. Because I remember for years before now, in my department, we used to have, there was this thing about at the end of the financial year being able to say to the government, we were very thrifty in our spending, frugal in our spending.
You don't get it back.
You give us $10 and we're giving you, we only spend 8 out of the $10 to show
you're getting 8.
You're being efficient. When what you're doing is stifling the department because the 10 couldn't do in the first place. And just for the individual to seem efficient, you're only spending 8, leaving a lot of things undone. The next time you're gonna get 8. And so poor budgeting was one of the issues. And being reactive is another issue. So for example, now in a period of COVID, where I work, in my department, we're all across the island. And one of the things that we need, that is necessary for our work, is a laptop, a computer, even a desktop, a computer. And all officers have been using their personal computers to do the government work for how many years? And despite lobbying to get personal computers, it was never seen as something important. Not necessarily because budgeted for it over the years, but because, coming back to what you said about the management, the management over the unit, not seeing that particular tool as a priority because officers were already utilizing their own personal tools to get the job done. Now in a COVID time, when persons are sticking out that, nope, we need to work from home, we don't have the resources to do so efficiently, and something needs to happen. And it took somebody above that person to start making, you know, some strong arguments for it.
Advocacy for it, yeah.
The trade.
I think to get stuff sometimes is to appeal to the department in Ministry of Finance that supervise your department.
You see, one of the things
they discuss the budget with them.
Yes.
So sometimes you need a friend at Ministry of Finance to help push the things that you want.
So one of the things that I like, I'm seeing a comment from Olivine Thomas, participatory culture and regular feedback. So that is important. That's one of the things I'm seeing. And that's a great intervention. I like those two concepts, participatory culture, Because when you have a participatory culture, you have a greater buy-in from the staff. They feel that they're a part of it, and therefore they will respond to it. So often in a lot of organizations, you hear the CEO and the senior management speaking, but there's a great disconnect between what they say and speak and what actually happens at the lower level, because there was never the buy-in at all. So one of the fastest ways to get buy-in is to have an involvement from all levels of the organization. That's important. I want to commend the University of the West Indies, because when they were doing their, I remember their 2007 to 2012 strategic plan, they had town hall meetings. And at the town hall meetings, you saw the groundsman and you saw the principal. And I'm talking about the two ends of the spectrum of the organization, because they wanted buy-in. They had to involve everybody in that process. So that's one of the ways to do it. When you build a strategic plan, everybody needs to be involved, from the person who does the coffee serving to the person who heads the organization. You get the buy-in, and when you have the buy-in, you have a better team in effect. And one organization that work from home meant that on the days that people were off, it was basically a day off for them, because they didn't have the tools to do the work from home. So not coming to work was really an unofficial holiday for them. If work from home is going to be effective, you need to have people who are equipped to do the work, and we hold them accountable. We set targets for them, even though they're at home, and these targets are met. These targets are met. Okay, any other comments? I think we looked at some of the issues that the third part of the question would have dealt with. Now, where are we next week? I want to just make sure that we are somewhere next week. I want us to look at St. John Hospital. We have the question for St. John Hospital, don't we? Can we all look on our papers to see that we have it? St. John Hospital. Do we have that? Can you respond, please? St. John Hospital. I think it's
okay, sir. Question,
yes, question 5. So this is a question we're going to look at. I want you to do some work on it, play with the numbers, and we are going to discuss it next week. You have the working, and you have the question, and you have the working. So please let us do some work on it. You have the layout. So let us do what we have to do. Are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If you have issues with the working out of any question that we did this evening, please, I expected you first of all to put up your hand in the group. Your whiteboard is in your hand. The working is given to you. I've spoken you through it, but if you still have issues, please ask the questions. I'm not going to tolerate feedback saying you didn't have a whiteboard. Please ask, and it shall be granted unto you. So have a productive week and have question 5 prepared. More power to you if it's right. Okay. If there are no questions, then we're going to bring on close to the evening. But if there are questions, certainly.
I'm not sure how this, I mean, But in the other courses that we have, we are in groups, I guess because we have group work.
Yes, you're going to have a group assignment. Now, what you can do, there is a synergy, I am sure, that you have. Your mid-semester assignment will be a group assignment. And so what I'm going to do, in order not to rock the boat too much, the group, you can work from that group that you're in for the other assignments. Are you hearing that?
Yeah, you mean for this group?
For this group, yes. So this group can mirror how many persons in each group? We have about 30 persons. So if we have 5 in a group, so I'd have 6 groups.
Mm-hmm. I just asked the question because I just think that even for the mid-semester, it would be good if we could work as a group as well.
No, but that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Hmm.
So we are going to work as a group.
Okay.
It will be a group assignment. And the groups, I'm saying that the group that you're in for your other classes, those groups can remain.
Belinda is new to this group, so we'll be asking a group to welcome her.
Okay, oh, that's the background to that. Okay. Okay, so that is something that you, Trisha Gay, where are you? You're still there? Are you sleeping, Trisha Gay?
Yes, sir, I'm sleeping.
Okay, that's a sin. That's a sin. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to the Trisha Gay, once you've ironed out the groups, about how many persons in a group, Trisha? About 5?
5 to 6.
5 to 6, I can accept that because what I want about 5 to 6 groups. And then of course, it is in that context. So put the groups together, please. And I want you to send them to me in the course of this week. And I'll have the assignment. It will be a discussion type assignment for you all.
Okay, sir.
So is my instruction clear, Trisha? If it isn't, you know how to get in touch with me. But it is just creating groups of 6.
Sir, there are groups already created.
Yes, okay.
There are groups already created. So what I'll do is place Belinda. And there's an M Spence. I'm not sure. Is that Marvin?
But Marvin, who is M Spence? Yes, I see that person down there. Who is M Spence? That person is absent. Let me warn students. I'm not saying anybody is doing it, but in other settings they do it. They set up the computer and they're absent. I'm warning you. I'm warning you. The recalcitrant students, they pay bitterly. If you want to find the money again to do the course, well, you know, if you have that money to spend twice, I would suggest that you make a gift to the department and don't spend it on an exam twice or a course twice. So let's do the work. Because if you're a recalcitrant student, I'm not going to tolerate any conversation from you if you don't get through. Do the work. I'm warning you. And if you have issues, please raise your hand in the course of the class and indicate that you have a question. And you've seen me operating. We've been together for 3 or 4 weeks. You don't hear me shut down anybody when it comes to a question, nor do I put down people when they seek clarification, because I want you to learn.
There are some of us just getting to know Zoom, to be honest. I'll be very honest about my ignorance as it relates to Zoom. So I'm just getting into the chat space and whatever. So hence the reason why I didn't raise my hand. I didn't know how to.
No. Sometimes I prefer, because sometimes I'm so caught up in what I'm saying, I don't look on the chat. So raise your voice and ask your question. Don't type it in chat because I might miss it. And it might make a lie of what I just said a while ago. raise your voice and ask your question. I might not answer it now like Giovanni asked a question earlier and I said, not now, but I will answer it. And I did. But ask your questions because I'm not going to be taking poor excuses from students. There's no reason why anybody should fail this course. No reason. And don't wait till the bells start to ring. Answer and ask the questions early. These are my few words to you. Go in peace and have a productive week. Prepare St. John's Hospital, all of you without fail. If there's anybody absent, please touch base with them and tell them what is required of them. Okay?
Belinda, I add my email address in the chat. You can send me an email.
Okay.
With your information, please.
Sure. Thank you.
Yes, and Trisha,
M Spence. I'm not sure who M Spence is.
Trisha, you will send me. I think Miss Thomas can answer that question, Trisha, about who M Spence is.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And clearly, M Spence would be in a group, so there are members who might be able to account for M Spence. So Trisha, in the course of the coming week, can you just send me the list, please, of all the groups, not just your group, but all the groups?
No problem.
Yes, and thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for coming out. Those of you who stayed the course, thanks. Okay.
Nice.
Okay, good. Yes.
Bye.
Okay then, yes.